Turkey just turned against NATO, choosing to defy all orders instead of working in a coordinated and strategic way. After decades of maintaining incredible ties with Moscow, it seems like this could theoretically come to an end, affecting many economic relations between the two nations. For the last 3 years, Turkey has been actively assisting in Ukraine. Meanwhile, it has also spent a lot of effort to ensure that Moscow remains happy and that energy can keep flowing. Now it seems like Turkey has had enough, and with the biggest military in Europe, it seems like Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is no longer willing to be led by countries like France and Germany. But here's some context. Since the start of 2025, the natural status quo and world order have been upended. President Donald Trump has been following an America First policy, antagonizing some of his allies and creating further division with his enemies. Regarding the situation in Ukraine, the United States has also made a few bold moves. First of all, President Trump stated that he'd like the war to find a peaceful solution before he spends 100 days in office. This has led to increasing pressure being placed on both Ukraine and Russia. However, Trump has been slowly strengthening his ties with the Kremlin, and more specifically, Russian President Vladimir Putin. The United States President proposed a deal in which Ukraine would cede some of its rare earth minerals to the United States, and in return, the U.S. would send business to Ukraine to mine these minerals. Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky didn't take this too kindly and demanded that actual U.S. troops be sent as a way of ensuring Ukrainian security from future Russian aggression. This led to a massive standoff in the White House, resulting in Zelensky being booted from the U.S. presidential palace. In retaliation, the United States made 2 vital moves. The first of these was to pause all current aid to Ukraine. Trump followed this up with another blow to Ukraine by pausing the sharing of all U.S. intelligence. Zelensky eventually gave in and said that he was ready to sign the deal. Meanwhile, NATO, under the leadership of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, held a summit in London. All European nations again pledged their support for Ukraine, with the UK and France being willing to send troops to help maintain the peace if such an agreement is signed. Turkey was also present for this summit, and even though they said they'd also participate in these peace missions, they demanded not to be sidelined in peace negotiations. The UK and France would go on to lead this NATO plan, with a big member not being present. This was certainly a shock when the United States again declined to be part of such a summit. Now, it seems like all these plans are frustrating Ankara, and what's even more shocking is the fact that Turkey now seems to be willing to take matters into its own hands. Before we find out exactly how, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for your daily military report. Unfortunately, Turkey has not been very vocal about its plan. It is mostly whispered coming from Ankara through various anonymous sources. With most talks being held behind closed doors, we can only get an idea of what Turkey plans to do. It all started in the middle of February, when Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan floated the idea of sending Turkish troops to maintain the peace between Ukraine and Russia. Turkey mentioned these plans to both President Zelensky and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov as a way of testing what the responses would be. Following the meeting in Ankara, the Ukrainian president told reporters that peace would only be possible if everyone who is really able to provide security guarantees is involved. This followed President Trump's 90-minute phone call with his Russian counterpart. Moreover, the United States sent a special envoy, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Middle East Representative Steve Witkoff. Following the meeting, hopes were high, and Trump again stated that peace would be established in Ukraine in no time. Not only did this frustrate Ukraine, who had not been invited to the meeting, but even NATO became frustrated to not be included. One of these NATO countries that didn't like these meetings was Turkey. But as Russia got closer to the United States, Ukraine began improving ties with Turkey. This is what President Zelensky told reporters in Ankara. Today, we discuss this issue with President Erdogan, and I am grateful to him for his understanding. It's very simple. Ukraine doesn't only want NATO at the negotiation table, but it has made it clear that Turkey should also be part of these negotiations. The good thing about this is that Turkey seems to be on board. However, they not only want to contribute, they are willing to take the lead in this situation. A few days later, on March 6th, an anonymous source within the Turkish Defense Ministry said that Turkey can certainly contribute to ensure the safety of Ukraine, and that it has enough troops to actually have boots on the ground in the country. Admiral Zeki Akturk, who serves in the Turkish Defense Ministry, also reaffirmed this by stating that Turkey will send troops to Ukraine if it is necessary to ensure peace and stability in the region. This reaffirmed the fact that Turkey is willing to act. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom and France have been flipping on this idea. Both have stated they are willing to send troops to Ukraine, but have also sowed some doubt about this ever happening. On March 8th, during a virtual European summit, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan again said that if Europe is willing to reshape defensive efforts, Turkey should have a say, and they should be a key figure in these negotiations. But perhaps the biggest move came on March 11th. Turkey's Chief of General Staff, Metin Gurak, went to another summit to be held in Paris. Among his peers were about 38 of the top defense chiefs in the world, with most of Europe and NATO having a representative at this meeting. Unfortunately, the United States again chose not to get involved, which meant that a major power vacuum was slowly becoming a reality for NATO. Now, every large country, including the UK, France, Germany, and Turkey, is looking to fill this massive gap. During these meetings, most nations were quite keen on seeing peace in Ukraine, but they were all searching for a leader. Turkey, with the biggest contingency of troops in Europe and second to only the United States and NATO, seems to be willing to fill this gap. Unfortunately, they are not just doling out these troops, and according to President Erdogan, there are a few prerequisites that need to be mentioned before Turkey will even consider adding troops to Ukraine. Nothing is free in this world. Even the UK had to repay the United States for decades and give back the assistance the US had lent to the UK during World War II. One of the first conditions Turkey demands is that a peace deal, or at least a ceasefire, needs to be in place. Turkey is unwilling to send combatants to the border and get into active skirmishes with Russia. After all, Ankara and Moscow have enjoyed great ties, especially when it comes to trade. Turkey emphasized that non-combatant troops would be sent. These troops also considered monitors merely focused on monitoring the situation and reporting back to Ankara. However, sending them into an active war zone means that contact is inevitable, and this could worsen the relationship between the Kremlin and Ankara. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like these two nations are on the verge of making peace. Russia has responded with a few ridiculous demands that neither the United States, the EU, nor Ukraine is willing to accept. Secondly, Turkey is extremely adamant that it should have a seat at the negotiation table. Ankara doesn't want to be sidelined during negotiations, and they will want to be a pivotal player in seeking peace talks to actually turn into a reality. Finally, Turkey seems to have grown tired of the UK, France, and Germany being the drivers of these talks. Turkey no longer wants to be sidelined in setting up a peace agreement and might want to be actively involved. This shows how frustrated Ankara has become by the way NATO has been dealing with this matter, leading to many speculating that perhaps Turkey would go it alone. Not only this, but Turkey might use its leverage with both Ukraine and Russia to bring peace talks to Ankara, and we might eventually see the Ankara Agreement take place, similar to what happened in Minsk in 2014. However, Turkey has not yet indicated whether they can do this, and the question remains, should both Russia and Ukraine be willing to negotiate? Does Turkey actually have the means to make this a reality? Two main questions need to be answered before something like this can take effect. The first is whether or not Turkey can actually deploy troops, and do they have the capabilities of funding such a large-scale operation? One of the biggest challenges is the number of troops it would take to employ such an operation in Ukraine. According to a Belgian think tank called Bruegel, it would take an astonishing 300,000 troops for such an operation to be successful. Given the fact that Turkey has about 355,000 active military personnel, it means that more than 80% of all Turkish troops would need to be deployed to Ukraine. Not only is this ridiculous and would make Turkey extremely vulnerable, but all these troops need to be funded. In terms of current support, Turkey has about 128 troops currently stationed in Lebanon. A few other officers are also contributing to various other United Nations missions, but this doesn't mean that the UN is funding them. It is Turkey who needs to foot the bill for their own troops. The UN only contributes about $1,400 to such operations, and this leaves a large funding gap, which might not make it financially viable for Turkey to pursue. For comparison, the UN currently has around 14,000 troops currently stationed in Lebanon. This is following the devastation Israel had brought upon Hezbollah in late 2024. According to a defense analyst from the Center for Strategic and International Studies named Benjamin Jensen, it would take almost 10 times this number just to have a decent number of troops in Ukraine. President Zelensky further exclaimed this by stating that it would take between 100,000 and 150,000 troops for such an operation to be barely successful. Despite the high ambitions Turkey has when it comes to sending troops, it might not be close to enough unless they are willing to risk their entire military force in a way that would put a lot of pressure on the country itself. Furthermore, Turkey doesn't have the funds to sustain such an operation. Despite having the second biggest military in NATO, Turkey only has the 17th largest economy in the world. This puts a lot of pressure on the country, especially when it comes to military funding. So, what is the most likely scenario? Let's face it, other European countries like Germany, the United Kingdom, and France have large economies. Shifting funding to deploy troops for peacekeeping missions should not be a problem. However, the UK military is at the smallest it has been in history. France has a few troops, but not enough. And the German military is non-existent. According to sources, both France and the UK will be able to send roughly 30,000 troops. This still leaves a massive gap, with at least another 120,000 needed to ensure the security of Ukraine in the future. The current problem is that there is virtually no other country that can actually fill up this gap by itself, aside from the United States. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has made it clear that the US will not be sending troops to Ukraine, and this poses a big problem. Smaller countries, like Spain, Italy, and even the Scandinavian countries either oppose this, or they have a cautious stance. If these countries are not willing to get on board, it will almost certainly create a large gap in the numbers needed to shore up Ukraine. Moreover, Ukraine itself might be able to fill these gaps, but this will not be a direct problem for Russia. Ultimately, it means that without the United States, this will not be viable, and there is absolutely no way for peace agreements to take place when no security guarantees can be ensured. But this is merely the basics, and there are a few other plans that we will get to, which ultimately screws Russia. Since the dawn of the Russian invasion, Ankara has been focused on keeping ties with both Russia and Ukraine. Turkey is a member of NATO, often restricting their interactions with Putin, but also holds a lot of power within NATO itself. In fact, Turkey has the second largest military in NATO, which consists of more than 350,000 active troops. However, no one has ever seen the might of this incredible force, only to be rivaled by the United States and possibly France. Make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel. Smash that bell notification to stay updated with the latest military report. With such a strong position in NATO, Turkey played a vital part in allowing both Sweden and Finland to join NATO, two proposals Ankara was initially hesitant to accept. Moreover, Turkey borders the Black Sea, a landmark of strategic importance. with all imports and exports having to go through the country. Once the rest of the world put sanctions on Russia, Turkey simply refused, granting Russia access to use the Black Sea for its dwindling exports. But since taking office in 2014, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has signaled strong support for Ukraine. Initially, Turkey condemned the annexation of Crimea in 2014. This was followed by deeper condemnation following Russia's invasion in 2022. In fact, Turkey was one of the first nations to send military aid to Ukraine following the war. The introduction of the Bayraktar TB2 drones would play a major role in stemming Russian advances. This was especially helpful while Turkey awaited further assistance from its Western partners. To further reduce the conflict, Ankara invoked the 1936 Montreux Convention. Under this convention, Turkey could close both the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits to warships. This essentially prevented Russian warships from exiting the Black Sea. Many of these ships, including the sinking of the Moskva, the Russian Navy's flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. Furthermore, Turkey brokered the very important Black Sea Grain Initiative, which secured the continual export of Ukrainian grains to the rest of the world. In fact, all initial reports suggested that Turkey was siding with NATO and the rest of Europe. Well, this would be the case until the West began ramping up pressure. As of this video, the EU has imposed 16 different rounds of sanctions on Russia. The latest is claimed to be the most severe and could seriously destroy the Russian economy even further. With inflation already at 9.9% and interest rates over 20%, it is quite a situation Russia finds itself in. But Ankara refrained from joining these sanctions, ensuring that economic ties between the two countries remain. The reason for this? Well, Russia supplies a significant portion of Turkey's natural gas. Other trade between the two countries includes things like oil and tourism, especially with the two countries having a bit of cultural ties. Finally, Turkey played host to one of the first meetings between the two nations. Ankara managed to bring together the foreign ministers of both Ukraine and Russia. Unfortunately, the meeting would not be fruitful and didn't yield any solution to the problem. It is also worth mentioning that Turkey shares interest with Russia, especially surrounding the current situation in Syria. Both nations have a vested interest in the outcome of the recent rebel uprising in the country. But why hasn't anyone called out Turkey for their fence-sitting? Well, Turkey has direct control over the Black Sea, which gives it strategic significance. It could easily allow Russian warships to pass through and enter the wider open oceans. This would not only pose a threat to Kyiv, but could even be a significant problem for the United States and the rest of Europe. By all accounts, the main goal for Turkey is to have this war end as soon as possible, maintain ties with Russia due to its interwoven economy, and keep NATO happy by supporting the sovereignty of Ukraine. Despite this seeming like a tightrope, it actively seeks to develop its own interests. While the UK, the EU, and Russia are all superpowers spending resources, Turkey is building a nation. This could soon see them rise as one of the European superpowers. But which solutions have Turkey come up with? As mentioned, Turkey was the first to bring the two warring parties to the negotiation table. The country played host to talks between the Russian and Ukrainian foreign ministers in March 2022. But aside from that, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has also focused his efforts on hosting peace talks in the country. Since Turkey has great bilateral ties with the West and the Eastern Bloc nations, Ankara seems like the perfect venue for neutral discussions. In March 2024, Ankara also exclaimed that they do not believe Russia is likely to succeed in their invasion, rather suggesting dialogue between the various stakeholders. One problem, however, is that Turkey has not set up any real peace plans. In fact, only Europe has suggested peace plans, all of which includes Russia simply abandoning their operations and giving Ukraine its territory back. But judging by the Russian demeanor, this seems to be an overreach by the EU. Nevertheless, President Erdogan once again stated in February 2025 that the only way for sustainable peace is by restoring Ukraine's full territorial integrity. This includes the previously annexed location of Crimea. Turkey has also pointed out the need for restoring the Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson oblasts to Ukraine, moves that Russia seems unwilling to abide by. To force this, Ankara has ramped up the delivery of armored vehicles and corvettes and bolstered defensive capabilities for Ukraine. This means that Turkey is currently walking a very, very fine line. But what about Turkish troops? Is this an actual possibility? And how would Russia respond? Nowadays, almost every country has its own idea of what peace would look like for Ukraine. The fact of the matter is that peace needs to be established before it can be enforced. In a recent meeting held by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the UK and many of its European allies pledged their undying support for Ukraine. By using the proceeds of frozen Russian assets, Britain is planning to build 5,000 new air defense missiles to send to Ukraine. This strategy is very simple. It basically relies on EU countries to continue pressuring the Russian economy. The hope is that should Russia lose its economy, people will suffer. This suffering will increase the pressure on President Vladimir Putin to perhaps end the war. Once he ends the war, sanctions will be lifted, which again secures the Russian economy. Well, that was the European plan, and it used to be the same strategy Washington would abide by. Then this happened.
We have some breaking news. CBS News has confirmed the Trump administration is pausing all military aid to Ukraine.
This unprecedented move follows the recent breakdown in diplomacy between Russia and Kiev, a situation that saw both President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance rip into Volodymyr Zelensky. It not only caught Europe off guard, but sent EU policymakers into perhaps rethinking their support for Ukraine. Without a solid U.S. backstop, the EU could push forward with their agenda, but at what cost? With Turkey not willing to cooperate in terms of sanctions, and its military presence still a major talking point, the EU might just have to give up on this fight, but they won't. Fortunately, it seems like President Trump might have one final card to play, and this is to convince Ukraine to sign a minerals deal. Should the deal be enacted, it would permit the U.S. to set up companies in Ukraine to process these minerals. According to Trump and large parts of his constituency, having U.S. civilians in Ukraine would serve as a way of deterring any future Russian aggression. Moreover, Trump has said that Putin will accept such a deal, a claim that has not yet been verified by any person in power. For Turkey, this once again allows them to step in and make peace. President Erdogan made his first attempt at a deal at the G20 in November of 2024. According to numerous reports, it is suggested that Ankara would propose a plan, which would turn the border along Ukraine and Russia into another demilitarized zone. This would be similar to the current border between North and South Korea. The deal suggested that international forces would be deployed on peacekeeping missions, whereby they would sustain the peace while delaying Ukraine's NATO membership by 10 years. Despite Russia rejecting this offer, it would have been the closest to a realistic post-war peace agreement that anyone has put on the table. Ultimately, it ensures that Turkey still maintains good relations with Russia and also creates a stalemate between the two countries in which no one takes a decisive victory or loss. Problem is that Ukraine has already lost about 18% of its territory. This is about 42,000 square miles of land. Essentially, freezing the war as it is and retaining the current front lines as borders would see Ukraine walk away with a bloody nose. Furthermore, Ukraine currently holds a decent chunk of territory in Kursk, and Russia is not willing to let Kiev take this. This is also the reason for the introduction of North Korean troops to shore up these counteroffensive initiatives. So basically, this means that the Turkish plan will not be effective. But why? There are currently 3 major problems with the Turkish peace plan. First of all, Russian resistance is a big problem. Moscow is unwilling to discuss these plans if Turkey continues its military support to Ukraine. Russia has repeatedly cited the killing of Russian forces using Ukrainian drones as a big problem. The fact that Turkey is part of NATO also creates more distrust among the Kremlin. Secondly, the West and many other NATO allies have further cited their skepticism towards Ankara due to its energy and trade ties with the Russian Federation. Two such instances are the Akuyu nuclear plant and the delay in accepting Sweden as part of NATO. Finally, a major hindrance in these negotiations is the fact Ukraine insists on keeping its sovereign integrity. This means that Kyiv is unwilling to cede any of its territories and wants to have it restored to pre-war boundaries. Unfortunately, Russia doesn't seem to be willing to allow this. So, despite the strong Turkish drive to restore peace, it seems like too many hindrances are currently blocking any meaningful progress from being made. This leaves Turkey with very few options, only being limited to perhaps sending troops directly to Ukraine. With the Trump peace agreement more and more likely to eventually take place, Europe is scrambling for a plan to ensure that Ukraine will be protected. One of the first suggestions is that of sending air support. The UK has hinted at perhaps sending the coveted Eurofighter Typhoon to patrol the Ukrainian border. While this would be a great step in the right direction, it is simply not feasible. The UK doesn't have enough of these aircraft to sustain these peacekeeping missions. And even if London sends about 20 of these 4.5 Gen aircraft to Ukraine, it will still leave large gaps. A second suggestion was sending troops to the demilitarized zone. These troops would serve as a deterrence for further Russian aggression, or it is supposed to, according to Prime Minister Starmer. While modern Charles de Gaulle and French President Emmanuel Macron have also proposed sending troops, Paris has recently backtracked on this proposal, rather suggesting adding more military aid for Ukraine. This includes the likes of the Mirage 2000-5, a fourth-generation fighter, which currently serves a bigger role than the US-built F-16, thanks to its ability to carry the Storm Shadow cruise missile, which can easily reach deep into Russian territory. Not only does it pose a threat to Russia, but it has been designed to work in conjunction with current Western air defenses. On the Turkish side, reports suggest that President Erdogan has discussed the possibility of sending troops to the Ukrainian border. Erdogan supposedly discussed this with both Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to Bloomberg, this is further solidified with Turkey stating that boots on the ground could work, but Turkey has an ultimatum. Ankara believes that before enforcing any peace plans, they should play a pivotal role in these negotiations. But despite any agreements being reached, the total number of troops that could possibly be stationed in Ukraine could number around 30,000. This would prove a serious deterrent for a future Russian invasion. Admittedly, the involvement of Turkish troops seems speculative at best. So how will this play out? Judging by all the rhetoric and the current speculation, it doesn't seem like Turkey is willing to involve itself in something that could hurt its ties with either Russia or its Western allies. Should Turkey send troops to Ukraine, it will almost certainly be on Turkey's terms. Moreover, it might not be feasible for Turkey to even send troops to Ukraine. The Turkish economy is still an emerging market and currently has an economic growth projection of just over 2% for 2025. What it could mean for Turkey is that the country is more inclined to reduce military spending. Currently, Turkey holds a presence on its northern border and in the Black Sea. By not having to secure these borders, it does open up further economic opportunities. Perhaps the best solution for Turkey would be to have the war just ended. This ensures that Ankara has ridden out the storm of walking the fine line. Ankara would retain its strong ties with Russia, while being in a favorable light with its Western allies. It is also worth mentioning that Russia doesn't like the fact that Turkey is siding with some of its Western allies on critical foreign policy. The only difference is that Russia is dependable on its exports to Turkey, and it simply cannot afford to possibly damage this reputation. Furthermore, The continuous sanctioning of Russia could cripple its economy even further. This will make Russia even more dependent on some of the countries who are still willing to serve as backers. At the end of the day, a peace agreement would be beneficial to all parties. Having Turkey as part of the peace enforcement process would significantly bolster the West. Ankara could re-establish stronger ties with Moscow, which could help the Russian economy recover. But what do you think? Will Turkey be able to tread this fine line? Or will Turkish troops deepen the rift between Moscow and the West? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel for your daily dose of the military report. And thank you for watching.